What does courage truly look like? Is it the roar of a lion, the broad shoulders of a hero, the booming voice of a commander leading the charge? We are taught to look for strength in the obvious places, to see power in displays of force and confidence in declarations of certainty. But what if true courage is quieter? What if it's found not in the noise but in the silence? What if the steadiest hand in the world belongs to someone you never even noticed, someone you dismissed, someone you laughed at? This is a story about that kind of courage. It's the story of a woman who was told she didn't belong, who was seen as a fragile liability in a world of hardened men. It's the story of how she walked into the heart of a nightmare, armed with nothing but a quiet strength they couldn't possibly understand, and reminded them all that the most powerful force on earth is a human spirit that refuses to be broken. It begins, as these stories often do, in a place defined by noise and pressure, a place where Anya Sharma was the quietest thing in the room. The locker room of the city's elite bomb disposal unit smelled of stale coffee, sweat, and ozone. It was a symphony of aggressive masculinity. Heavy boots clanged on the concrete floor, lockers slammed shut with metallic finality, and laughter, loud and bruising, echoed off the tiled walls. In the center of this storm was Sergeant Mark Jennings, a man built like a battering ram with a personality to match. He held court, his voice a gravelly boom that demanded attention. And his attention, all of it, was fixed on the unit's newest recruit, Anya Sharma. She was in the corner, a small island of stillness in the chaotic sea of men. While they boasted and postured, she methodically checked her gear, her movements precise and economical. Her hands, slender and graceful, moved over the sensitive electronics of her diagnostic kit with the familiarity of a musician tuning an instrument. Jennings watched her, a sneer playing on his lips. "Look at her, boys," he announced, his voice dripping with contempt. "Our new diversity hire. Fresh out of the academy, probably got a perfect score in basket weaving. You think those little fingers can handle a real device? She looks like a strong breeze would knock her over," a wave of snickering followed. The other men, most of them veterans who had earned their place through years of nerve-shredding service, took their cue from Jennings. They saw what he wanted them to see, a woman who was too small, too quiet, too different. They didn't see the years of training that had honed her mind into a razor's edge. They didn't see the iron will that lay beneath her calm exterior. They only saw what they expected to see. Anya didn't react. She didn't look up. She simply continued her work, her focus an impenetrable shield against their ridicule. She had heard it all before, in 1,000 different ways, throughout her life. The words were just noise, and she had learned long ago to filter out the noise. Only the signal mattered. The signal, in this case, was the faint hum of the calibrator in her hands. In her office, overlooking the training yard, Captain Eva Rostova sighed, rubbing the tension from her temples. She was a woman caught between a rock and a hard place. The rock was the city council, demanding budget cuts and increased diversity quotas. The hard place was her team, a unit of brilliant but deeply entrenched traditionalists led by the charismatic but problematic Sergeant Jennings. She had approved Anya Sharma's transfer against Jennings's vocal objections. It wasn't just about the quotas. It was about Anya's file. It was flawless. Top of her class in demolitions theory, engineering, and electronics. But it was the psychological evaluation that had caught Rostova's eye. Anya had achieved a perfect score on the Hoffman Stability Index, a notoriously brutal test designed to measure grace under unimaginable pressure. No one had ever aced it. Most seasoned veterans barely passed. The psychologist's notes were sparse, almost cryptic, subject displays an almost preternatural calm. Her emotional baseline is remarkably low. Does not react to stress stimuli in a conventional manner. It's not that she suppresses fear, it's as if she processes it differently, like data. Rostova had taken a gamble. She had seen something in that file, a hint of the kind of strength her team desperately needed, even if they didn't know it. The squad was good, the best in the state, but they were predictable. They relied on brute force and established protocols. The new generation of threats, however, were anything but predictable. They were complex, asymmetrical, designed by minds that thrived on chaos. Rostova had a chilling premonition that one day, brute force wouldn't be enough. One day they would need a different kind of weapon. Maybe, just maybe, that weapon was a quiet woman with the steady hands of a watchmaker. Because that's what Anya had been before she joined the force. A horologist. A mender of time. In a tiny, sun-drenched workshop filled with the gentle ticking of 100 tiny hearts, she had spent a decade learning the art of patience. She would spend hours, days even, hunched over a workbench, a loop screwed into her eye, manipulating gears and springs no bigger than a grain of sand. It was a world of absolute precision, where a single misplaced tremor of the hand, a single lapse in concentration, could shatter a delicate mechanism beyond repair. She had learned to slow her own heartbeat, to breathe in rhythm with the escapement wheel, to find a place of perfect stillness within herself. That was her secret. That was the source of her calm. The men in the locker room saw a fragile doll. They had no idea they were mocking a woman who had mastered time itself. And as Jennings's laughter echoed once more, Anya closed her kit, the final click of the latch as soft and definite as the setting of a watch. The day was just beginning, and she knew her time was coming. The training yard was Jennings's kingdom, and he ruled it with an iron fist. For the other recruits, it was a crucible designed to forge them into unflinching professionals. For Anya, it was a gauntlet of personalized torment. Jennings seemed to take a perverse pleasure in her suffering, designing drills that played to her perceived weaknesses. He'd make her carry the heaviest gear on long runs under the blistering sun, commenting loudly on her smaller frame. He'd put her on endless, mind-numbing sentry duty, guarding empty warehouses for hours, hoping to break her concentration through sheer boredom. When it came to the practical exercises, the disarming simulations, his cruelty became more refined. He would give her the dud assignments, the simple, repetitive tasks of checking perimeter sensors or managing the comms link, while the men got their hands on the dummy devices. "Wouldn't want you to break a nail, Sharma," he'd say with a saccharine smile that didn't reach his cold, dead eyes. On the rare occasions she was allowed to approach a simulated bomb, he would stand over her, a hawk watching a mouse. He'd bark criticisms, question her every move, and create false start distractions, trying to rattle her. "Faster, Sharma. You're moving like you're underwater." In a real scenario, we'd all be a pink mist by now. The other men, following his lead, kept their distance. They'd share a smoke and a joke while Anya cleaned the equipment. They'd head out for drinks after their shift, leaving her to file the after-action reports Jennings always assigned to her. She was an outsider, a ghost in their midst. But Anya never complained. She never rose to the bait. She simply absorbed the abuse, her face a mask of serene neutrality. She did every menial task with the same meticulous attention to detail she gave to studying bomb schematics. She ran every punitive lap without a word of protest, her breathing steady and even. Her silence was more infuriating to Jennings than any angry retort could have been. It was a wall he couldn't breach, a language he didn't understand. He wanted her to cry, to quit, to prove him right. Her quiet endurance was a constant, infuriating refutation of his prejudice. Her life outside the precinct was as disciplined and solitary as her work. She lived in a small, sparsely furnished apartment that was more workshop than home. The living room was dominated by a large workbench covered in the intricate guts of old clocks. This was her sanctuary, her dojo. Every night, while her colleagues were unwinding with beer and television, Anya was reassembling a 19th-century marine chronometer, or restoring the delicate chiming mechanism of a German cuckoo clock. Her fingers, which Jennings so readily mocked, danced among the tiny, complex parts. The work was her meditation. It centered her, calmed her, and sharpened the very skills her job demanded: unparalleled patience, microscopic attention to detail, and a hand that was impossibly, inhumanly steady. She wasn't just fixing clocks, she was training her mind and body, forging her own tools for a war she knew she would have to fight alone. One evening, Captain Rostova was leaving late and saw a light on in the unit's small library. Curious, she peered through the glass. It was Anya. She was surrounded by towering stacks of technical manuals, her head bent over a complex schematic of a military-grade explosive. She wasn't just reading, she was cross-referencing, making notes, her pen flying across a legal pad. Rostova watched for a long moment. There was no fatigue in Anya's posture, only a deep, humming focus. It was the same look Rostova had seen on the faces of bomb makers, the obsessive, all-consuming concentration of a true believer. But Anya's focus was aimed at deconstruction, not destruction. It was the focus of a healer, a problem solver. Rostova felt a flicker of something, hope perhaps, or validation. She had bet on the quiet woman, and every day, Anya was proving her instincts right, not with words or bravado, but with silent, relentless dedication. The next day, Jennings decided to escalate. The simulation was a classic, a pressure plate-activated device in a crowded subway car mock-up. The protocol was clear: use the hook-and-line kit to pull the package off the plate from a safe distance. It was a simple, brute force solution. But as Anya's turn came, Jennings intervened. Too easy, he sneered, stepping into the mock-up. He placed a small, almost invisible filament tripwire across the path of the hook-and-line. A little surprise from the bomber. Now the old way gets you blown up. You have to go hands-on. Let's see what you've got, watchmaker. It was a flagrant violation of the training scenario's parameters. It was designed to make her fail. The team watched, some with pity, others with grim satisfaction. Anya looked at the device, then at the tripwire. She took a deep breath, the kind she took before placing the final jewel in a watch's movement. She didn't pick up the heavy bomb suit. Instead, she knelt, her movements fluid and unhurried. She approached the device on her hands and knees, her eyes scanning every inch of the floor. She found the tripwire's anchor point, a tiny magnetic clasp hidden under a seat. She didn't try to cut it. Instead, she traced it back to the device, her fingers hovering just over the floor. She saw how it connected to a secondary trigger. She understood the puzzle. With a surgeon's precision, she used a single probe to lift the filament, slide a small insulating clip beneath it, and sever its connection to the trigger. Then, and only then, did she address the pressure plate. The entire process took less than 2 minutes. She had disarmed a trap designed to be unbeatable, and she had done it with a grace and economy of motion that left the onlookers speechless. She stood up, wiped her hands on her trousers, and looked directly at Jennings. For the first time, she spoke to him with something other than deference. "The trap was clever, Sergeant," she said, her voice soft but clear as a bell. "But a real bomb maker would have used a higher gauge wire. That one would have snapped under its own tension in a humid environment. It's a rookie mistake," and with that, she walked away, leaving Jennings standing in the subway car, his face a mask of stunned fury. The first crack had appeared in his armor of contempt. And in the quiet space Anya left behind, a new sound could be heard, the grudging silence of respect. The call came on a Tuesday, a day of suffocating summer heat, that made the city feel like it was holding its breath. The dispatcher's voice was tight with urgency. A suspicious package had been found taped to a merry-go-round in the city's largest public park, right next to a playground teeming with children. The park had been evacuated, but a sense of coiled panic lingered in the air. For the bomb squad, it was a routine call, a chance to shake off the rust of endless simulations. Jennings, as senior sergeant, was the lead technician. He swaggered toward the command van, basking in the familiar adrenaline. This was his element. He was loud, decisive, and in complete control. "All right, people, let's look alive," he barked, clapping his hands together. "Rookie, you're on perimeter. Keep the rubberneckers back. Don't want any civilians getting a free fireworks show." He winked at the other men, another casual jab at Anya's inexperience. She simply nodded, grabbed a radio, and jogged toward the yellow tape line, her face impassive. She was used to being sidelined. From her position, she had a clear view of the merry-go-round and the small, crudely wrapped package at its center. Through her binoculars, she watched as Jennings, clad in the heavy, cumbersome bomb suit, made his slow, deliberate approach. He knelt beside the device, his movements practiced and confident. He ran his diagnostics, his voice a calm, professional drone over the team's comms. Standard pipe bomb, he reported. Galvanized steel, end cap construction. Trigger appears to be a simple pressure plate. A kid spins the merry-go-round, the centrifugal force shifts the weight and boom. Amateur hour. Captain Rostova, monitoring from the command van, watched the feeds from Jennings's helmet cam. Everything looked textbook. Proceed with manual disarm, Sergeant, she authorized. Jennings acknowledged and began to work, his gloved hands surprisingly nimble as he exposed the wiring. He identified the power source and the detonator. All that was left was to sever the connection. He reached for his wire cutters. But from her vantage point 200 yards away, Anya saw something else. It was nothing the helmet cam could have picked up, nothing the electronic sniffers would have detected. It was a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer in the air just above the device. The heat rising from the sun-baked metal of the merry-go-round was being distorted in a strange way. It was a subtle wrongness, a disturbance in the pattern. Her mind, trained to see the microscopic imperfections in a watch face, instantly flagged it. She zoomed in with her binoculars, her focus absolute. And then she saw it. Not a wire, not a switch, but a tiny, hair-thin filament of clear plastic, stretched taut between the bomb and the central pole of the merry-go-round. It was a trembler switch. A secondary trigger. Any vibration, the snipping of a wire, a sudden shift in weight, would cause the filament to shake and close a hidden circuit. Jennings's amateur hour device was a trap. The pressure plate was a decoy. The real trigger was designed to punish the exact procedure he was about to perform. Anya's blood ran cold. Protocol dictated she remain silent unless spoken to. A rookie did not question the lead technician in the middle of a live disarm. It was career suicide. But the image of the nearby playground, now empty but still echoing with the phantom laughter of children, flashed in her mind. She raised her radio to her lips, her hand steady. Her voice cut through the calm professionalism of the comms channel, quiet but sharp as broken glass. Sergeant, stop. There's a secondary. A trembler switch. The radio went silent. Every member of the team froze. In the command van, all eyes snapped to Rostova. Jennings's voice came back, laced with pure venom. What did you just say, Sharma? Get off this channel. Now, negative, Sergeant. Anya's voice was unwavering. There is a high-tension filament connected to the northern face of the device, anchored to the central column. You cut that wire, you trip it. The pressure plate is a misdirect. I'm looking right at the device, Sharma. Jennings roared, his frustration boiling over. There's nothing here. You're on the perimeter, you can't see a damn thing. Now get off my comms before I have you scrubbing toilets for a month. But in the van, Rostova was staring at her monitor, her knuckles white. She couldn't see the filament, but she could hear the certainty in Anya's voice. It was the same unnerving calm from her psychological file. It wasn't a guess, it was a statement of fact. Rostova had a choice: trust her seasoned, arrogant sergeant, or trust her gut and the quiet rookie nobody believed in. Hold, Jennings, Rostova's voice was steel. Hold your position, Captain, she's seeing things. Jennings protested. Sergeant, I said hold, Rostova repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. Describe the location of the filament, Sharma. Anya gave a precise, technical description, detailing the anchor points, the estimated tension, and the likely mechanism. It was a textbook analysis of something no one else could even see. Rostova made her decision. Jennings, I want you to take your fiber optic scope and examine the area Sharma described. Slowly, a long, tense silence followed. The only sound was Jennings's heavy, angry breathing over the radio. Then, a sharp, ragged intake of breath. My God, he whispered. The helmet cam shifted, and on the monitor in the van, the scope's image appeared. There, exactly where Anya had said it would be, was the filament, shimmering like a spider's thread in the harsh sunlight. It was almost perfectly invisible to the naked eye. Jennings had been seconds away from triggering it. The realization hit the team like a physical blow. The sergeant, their infallible leader, had almost gotten himself, and potentially others, killed. And the person who had saved him was the one he had ridiculed and dismissed. After another tense 10 minutes, following Anya's relayed instructions, Jennings managed to neutralize the trembler switch and then the main trigger. The bomb was disarmed. He walked back to the command van in a stony silence, his face pale beneath his helmet. He didn't look at Anya. He couldn't. He brushed past her, stripped off his gear, and said nothing. He simply stated for the official record that a final precautionary check had revealed the secondary device. He took the credit. But everyone on the team, and especially Captain Rostova, knew the truth. They had all heard her voice over the radio. They knew who had really seen the bomb. As the team packed up, one of the younger technicians, a man named Peterson, quietly walked over to Anya. He held out a bottle of water. "Good eye," he said, his voice low. It wasn't much. But it was the first crack in the wall of their contempt. It was a start. Anya simply nodded, took the water, and watched the sun glint off the silent, harmless merry-go-round. She hadn't done it for their approval. She had done it because it was her job. She had done it because she saw what needed to be done. The signal from the noise. That was all that mattered. The next morning, the air in Captain Rostova's office was thick with unspoken tension. She sat behind her large, imposing desk, a file open before her. It was the after-action report for the park incident. On the other side of the desk sat Anya, her posture perfect, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Rostova looked up, her eyes sharp and analytical. She wasn't here to offer praise or congratulations. She was here for answers. "Jennings's report makes no mention of your warning," Rostova began, her voice flat. "It states that he discovered the secondary trigger during a final visual sweep." "That's not what I heard over the comms." "Tell me what you saw, Sharma." "Exactly what you saw." Anya met her captain's gaze without flinching. There was no trace of resentment or pride in her expression, only a quiet desire to be precise. "I saw a disruption in the heat haze rising from the device," she explained. "Like a lens flare but structured. Symmetrical. It wasn't random. My work with watch crystals taught me to recognize minute optical distortions. A perfectly tensioned filament will bend light in a very specific way. I cross-referenced the pattern with the known schematics for trembler switches, and concluded there was a high probability of a secondary trigger." She spoke with the dispassionate clarity of a scientist describing an experiment. There was no emotion, just data and analysis. Rostova leaned back in her chair, studying the young woman before her. She had expected anger, a demand for recognition. Instead, she got a physics lesson. The psychologist's report had been right. Anya didn't process the world like other people. She didn't see a terrifying bomb, she saw a complex mechanical problem. She didn't feel fear, she felt the pull of a puzzle demanding to be solved. "Your background is in horology," Rostova stated, less a question than an observation. "Watchmaking, yes, Captain," Anya replied. "For 10 years. My family's business." "Why did you leave it to join the police?" "To join this unit." They seem like very different worlds. For the first time, a flicker of something personal crossed Anya's face. A shadow of a memory. "They're not as different as you might think," she said softly. "Both require a steady hand. Both require an understanding of how intricate systems can fail under pressure. And in both, a single mistake can have irreversible consequences." She left the rest unsaid, but Rostova understood. There was a story there, a reason for her preternatural calm, likely born from a moment of profound crisis. Rostova didn't push. She didn't need to. She had seen enough. "Sergeant Jennings is an excellent technician," Rostova said carefully. He's one of the best I've ever seen. But he's a hammer and he sees every problem as a nail. We're starting to see problems that aren't nails. Problems that require a scalpel, not a hammer. She closed the file. Your probationary period is over, effective immediately. I'm assigning you to work with Sergeant Miller on advanced device diagnostics. He's our best analyst. I want you to learn everything he knows about electronic signatures. And I want him to learn everything you know about seeing the invisible. Anya's expression didn't change, but a quiet acknowledgement shone in her eyes. She understood the significance of the gesture. Rostova was not only validating her, she was formally integrating her unique skill set into the team's core operations. She was bypassing Jennings's authority and creating a new path for her. "Thank you, Captain," Anya said simply. "Don't thank me," Rostova replied, her voice firm. "Just be ready. I have a feeling we're going to need you." The news of Anya's new assignment spread through the unit like wildfire. Jennings took it as a personal insult, a direct challenge to his authority and his judgment. His humiliation over the park incident curdled into a cold, simmering rage. He saw Rostova's move as a betrayal, a politically correct maneuver that prized a rookie's lucky guess over his years of decorated service. He confronted Rostova in her office, his voice barely controlled. "You're putting her with Miller. She's a rookie. She should be running drills and fetching coffee, not playing with the high-end diagnostic gear. She saved your life yesterday, Mark," Rostova said, her voice dangerously calm. "A life you were about to throw away because you were too arrogant to listen." Her lucky guess was a better piece of analysis than anything our multi-million-dollar equipment produced. "She has a skill we don't have. I'm going to use it." "It's a mistake," Jennings snarled. "She's going to get someone killed. She doesn't have the nerve for the real thing. That calm thing she does. It's not real. It's a mask. One day it's going to crack and people are going to die." "That's my call to make, not yours," Rostova said, ending the conversation. Defeated and furious, Jennings retreated. But his campaign against Anya didn't stop, it just went underground. He began to sow seeds of doubt among the team. He'd whisper in the locker room about how Anya was the captain's pet, how she was getting special treatment. He'd subtly question her findings in debriefings, framing his skepticism as professional concern. "Are we sure about this reading? It's highly anomalous. Maybe the rookie needs to double-check her calibration." The team, already predisposed to trust the veteran sergeant over the quiet newcomer, began to polarize. Some, like Peterson, who had seen what Anya could do firsthand, started to give her a wider berth of respect. Others, loyal to Jennings, treated her with a new, colder suspicion. She wasn't just an outsider anymore, she was a threat to the established order. Anya felt the shift, the new chill in the air. But she ignored it, just as she had ignored the open mockery. She poured herself into her work with Sergeant Miller. Miller was an older, quieter man, a technician who preferred the company of circuits to people. He was initially skeptical of Anya, but her profound and intuitive understanding of complex systems quickly won him over. He would show her a new type of electronic trigger, and she would immediately grasp its underlying principles, often pointing out potential weaknesses he hadn't considered. They would spend hours in the lab, a strange pair, the grizzled veteran and the young prodigy, poring over schematics, their shared language, the silent, elegant logic of electronics. Anya was finally in her element, her mind engaged and challenged. She was learning, growing, and becoming more formidable with each passing day. And as her confidence and expertise grew, so too did Jennings's resentment. He watched her from afar, his eyes narrowed. He saw her as a cancer in his unit, and he was determined to cut her out, one way or another. He just needed the right opportunity to prove to everyone, once and for all, that she was a fraud. He believed, with every fiber of his being, that he was doing it for the good of the team. He was going to save them from the quiet woman who saw too much. He was going to break her. The opportunity Jennings had been waiting for came during the annual advanced training certification, a week-long series of brutal, high-stakes simulations. It was the final test that separated the elite from the merely competent. For this year's centerpiece exercise, the department had invested in a new, state-of-the-art simulation rig, a full-scale mock-up of a bank vault, complete with a hyperrealistic hostage scenario and a bomb device of unprecedented complexity. The scenario was designed by a private contractor, a former Special Forces demolitions expert, and it was rumored to be unwinnable. Jennings saw his chance. As the senior training supervisor for the exercise, he had access to the device's schematics and control panel. The night before Anya was scheduled for her certification run, he stayed late, long after everyone else had gone home. Under the sterile glow of the workshop lights, he went to work. He didn't just want Anya to fail, he wanted her to break down, to panic, to expose the terrified rookie he was convinced lurked beneath her placid surface. With a grim satisfaction, he began to modify the bomb. He rerouted the primary circuitry, creating a feedback loop that would render standard diagnostic tools useless. He tightened the tension on the anti-tamper wires to a microscopic tolerance. He added a second, independent timer, hidden from view and linked to a sound sensor. Any loud noise above a certain decibel level would cut the main timer in half. Finally, in a stroke of what he considered malicious genius, he reprogrammed the disarm sequence. The standard protocol required cutting the wires in a specific color-coded order. Jennings changed it. Now the correct sequence was linked to the prime numbers. The blue wire was second, the green was third, the yellow was fifth, and so on. It was a purely intellectual puzzle, a cruel twist designed to punish methodical procedure and reward abstract mathematical reasoning under Durham stress. It was unfair, unauthorized, and incredibly dangerous, even in a simulation. But Jennings was past caring. He was a man on a mission, convinced of his own righteousness. He would expose the watchmaker for the fraud she was, and the team would be his again. The next day, the entire unit gathered in the observation room. The atmosphere was electric. 2 veteran technicians had already attempted the scenario and failed. The pressure was immense. When Anya's name was called, a hush fell over the room. Jennings stood at the back, a smug, predatory stillness about him. This was his moment. Anya entered the bank vault mock-up. An actor playing a hysterical bank manager was screaming, handcuffed to the vault door. A large digital clock on the wall showed 15 minutes and counting. In the center of the room sat the device, a chaotic spider's web of wires, circuit boards, and blinking lights. It was designed to intimidate. Anya took one look at the scene, and then she did something no one expected. She completely ignored the screaming hostage. She walked past him as if he weren't there, her eyes fixed only on the bomb. She knelt before it, and the entire world seemed to shrink to the space between her and the device. She didn't reach for her tools. She didn't run any diagnostics. She simply looked, her head tilted slightly, her gaze sweeping over the complex machinery. She was listening, not with her ears but with her eyes. She was reading the story the bomb maker was trying to tell. In the observation room, Jennings scoffed. What is she doing? Having a tea party with it. The clock is ticking. But Captain Rostova watched, her expression intense. She saw the absolute focus on Anya's face, the same look she'd had in her office, the same look she'd had at the park. This wasn't hesitation, it was analysis. On the comms, Anya's voice was unervingly calm. The wiring is deliberately chaotic, she stated, more to herself than to the observers. It's designed to confuse, to create informational overload. A scarecrow. The real mechanism is simpler. Her hands began to move, but not towards the wires. She lightly touched the casing of the device, her fingers tracing its seams. She was feeling for vibrations, for the subtle hum of its power source. She was mapping its internal geography by touch. She found the hidden sound sensor almost immediately. Acoustic trigger, she murmured. Set to a high decibel threshold, she glanced back at the still screaming hostage actor. Tell him to be quiet, or he'll cut our time in half. In the observation booth, a stunned silence fell. How could she possibly have known that? Jennings's face went pale. The simulation supervisor, on Rostova's nod, spoke into his microphone, and the actor immediately fell silent. The clock on the wall continued its steady, relentless countdown. Anya then turned her attention to the disarm sequence. She saw the familiar color-coded wires, but she also saw the subtle, illogical way they were integrated into the circuit board. It didn't follow any standard design. It was wrong. It was a trap. Her mind, accustomed to the elegant logic of clockwork, rebelled against the intentional chaos. This wasn't engineering, it was a message. A riddle. And then she saw it. A tiny, almost invisible series of numbers etched by the wire terminals. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. Prime numbers. A wave of understanding washed over her. It was a test, not of procedure but of perception. She picked up her wire cutters. Her hand did not tremble. Disarming now, she said, her voice even. Sequence is primed one by one, she snipped the wires. The blue one. The green one. The yellow one. The room held its collective breath. With each cut, the device should have been closer to inert, but Jennings's modifications had created one last surprise. A final, hidden relay. As she cut the last wire in the prime sequence, a single red light began to flash, and a high-pitched whine filled the room. A final, 30-second timer appeared on a hidden LED screen. It was Jennings's last laugh, a final gotcha to induce panic. But Anya didn't panic. She didn't even look at the new timer. Her eyes were still on the circuit board. She had already seen the relay. She had anticipated it. The prime number sequence was a distraction from the real flaw, a capacitor that was bleeding energy into a secondary circuit. It was a sloppy piece of design, an act of arrogance. With a movement so fast it was almost a blur, she used the insulated handles of her pliers to bridge two terminals, short-circuiting the relay, and instantly killing all power to the device. The whining stopped. The flashing light went out. The clock froze with 3 seconds remaining. Silence. A deep, profound silence filled the vault and the observation room. Anya had not just disarmed the bomb. She had dismantled the trap, solved the riddle, and defused the panic. She had beaten the scenario. She had beaten Jennings. Anya stood up slowly, her movements deliberate. She looked at the inert device, then turned her gaze towards the one-way glass of the observation room, as if she could see the stunned faces on the other side. She keyed her microphone one last time, her voice cool and precise, the voice of a scientist delivering a final, irrefutable conclusion. Simulation complete, she stated. I would also note for the record that the device has been illegally modified. The feedback loop on the primary circuit, the acoustic trigger, and the non-standard disarm sequence are all inconsistent with the parameters of Certification Protocol 7B. The modifications are amateurish. They introduce unnecessary variables and serve no practical training purpose. They are designed only to induce failure. Every word was a hammer blow, dismantling not just the bomb, but Sergeant Jennings's career. In the observation room, every eye turned to him. His face, once smug and confident, was now a ghastly shade of gray. He was exposed, his petty, vindictive sabotage laid bare for all to see. He tried to speak, to defend himself, but no words came out. He was a ghost at his own execution. Captain Rostova stepped forward, her face a mask of cold fury. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Jennings, she said, her voice like ice. My office. Now the walk to Rostova's office was the longest of Jennings's life. The whispers of his colleagues followed him down the hall like vultures. The respect he had commanded for 15 years had evaporated in 15 minutes. He was no longer a leader, he was a disgrace. The door to Rostova's office clicked shut behind him, sealing his fate. The confrontation was brief and brutal. Rostova didn't entertain his blustering excuses, or his pathetic attempts to justify his actions as a tough love training tactic. She laid out the facts coldly and clinically. He had endangered a fellow officer, even in a simulation. He had violated multiple regulations. He had abused his authority. And worst of all, he had allowed his personal prejudice to compromise the integrity of the entire unit. You were so blinded by your own ego, by your pathetic need to be right, that you couldn't see what was right in front of you, Rostova said, her voice trembling with a rage she rarely showed. You saw a woman, so you assumed she was weak. You heard quietness, so you assumed it was fear. You saw a different kind of skill, so you tried to crush it because you didn't understand it. This unit, this city, needs the best. It doesn't matter what they look like or where they come from. Anya Sharma is one of the best. And you, Mark, you are no longer fit to lead them, the words hung in the air, final and irrevocable. Jennings was stripped of his rank as senior sergeant and demoted. He was reassigned to the department's quartermaster, a desk job in the basement, counting inventory. It was a slow, ignominious end to a once-storied career. He was no longer on the front lines, he was a relic, a cautionary tale. The fallout within the team was immediate and profound. The cynical gatekeeper who had guarded the status quo was gone. His removal created a vacuum, and into that vacuum flowed a new, grudging respect for Anya. Her performance in the simulation had been undeniable. She hadn't just proven her skill, she had demonstrated a level of grace under pressure that even the most hardened veterans had to admire. The whispers of Captain's pet died out, replaced by murmurs of awe. Technicians started approaching her in the lab, not with suspicion, but with genuine questions. They would ask her to look over a complex schematic, or to give her opinion on a new piece of diagnostic gear. She was no longer the outsider. She was becoming the new center of gravity for the team, the quiet core around which they were slowly beginning to realign. Anya, for her part, took no pleasure in Jennings's downfall. She felt no sense of victory. She had not set out to destroy him, she had only wanted to do her job. She accepted her new role on the team with the same quiet humility she had shown in the face of their scorn. She shared her knowledge freely, her explanations always patient and clear. She was not a boastful teacher but a collaborative one. She didn't dictate, she guided. She was teaching them a new language, the language of patience, of observation, of seeing the world not as a series of threats to be overpowered, but as a series of complex puzzles to be gently and methodically solved. Captain Rostova watched the transformation with a deep sense of satisfaction. Her gamble had paid off. The team was changing, evolving. They were becoming stronger, more versatile, better prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. But none of them, not even Rostova in her most prescient moments, could have imagined the true test that was coming. A new shadow was falling over the city, a threat so sophisticated and malevolent that it would push them all to the absolute brink. A bomber who thought not in terms of circuits and switches, but in terms of gears and escapements. A killer who called himself the Clockmaker, and he was about to build his masterpiece. The Clockmaker announced his arrival not with a bang but with a tick. His first device was left in the grand lobby of the city's stock exchange, a beautiful, ornate box of brass and mahogany. Inside, visible through a glass panel, was not a chaotic mess of wires, but a breathtakingly complex array of interlocking gears, springs, and levers, all ticking down in perfect, synchronized harmony. It was less a bomb and more a work of art, a deadly Fabergé. The team, still operating under the old doctrines of force and electronics, was baffled. Their diagnostic tools were useless against the purely mechanical trigger. They tried to brute force a disarm and failed. The controlled detonation shattered the marble lobby and sent a shockwave of fear through the city's financial heart. The second device appeared a week later, in the engine room of the city's main power plant. This one was different, a fusion of antique clockwork and modern electronics, a hybrid nightmare that seemed to defy the laws of both disciplines. The team's best technicians, including Sergeant Miller, worked on it for 2 desperate hours, but the Clockmaker was always one step ahead. Every attempt to disable one system seemed to accelerate another. They were forced to evacuate and let it detonate, plunging half the city into darkness. Panic began to take root. The city was being held hostage by a ghost, a brilliant, invisible enemy whose motives were unknown. His only signature was the terrifying, metronomic ticking of his creations. He was a new kind of monster, and the old ways of fighting monsters were not working. The team was on edge, their confidence shattered. The easy bravado of the locker room was gone, replaced by a grim, fearful silence. They had been outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and humbled. Into this atmosphere of dread came the third call, the one they had all been fearing. It was the call that would change everything. The clockmaker had targeted the city's central children's hospital. His message, delivered to a local news station, was simple and chilling: "My masterpiece is in the heart of the innocent. It is a monument to time, and time is running out." The hospital was a scene of controlled chaos. Doctors and nurses rushed to evacuate their tiny, vulnerable patients. The wail of sirens was constant, a soundtrack of desperation. But many children in the neonatal and intensive care units were too fragile to be moved. They were trapped, their lives tethered to machines that could not be disconnected. They were helpless hostages in the clockmaker's grand, cruel design. The bomb squad arrived to find a scene from a nightmare. In the center of the soaring glass atrium, right beneath a whimsical mobile of colorful planets and stars, sat the device. It was enormous, a sphere of gleaming steel and glass nearly 6 feet in diameter. Inside, a horrifyingly complex clockwork mechanism turned, a universe of gears and pendulums. Wires snaked out from it, connecting to pressure plates on the floor, infrared sensors on the walls, and acoustic detectors in the ceiling. It was a comprehensive system of death, a fortress of a bomb. This wasn't just a device, it was a statement. Captain Rostova set up her command post in a van across the street, the monitors displaying a dozen different angles of the bomb. The faces of her team were grim, etched with tension. "What have we got, Miller?" she asked, her voice tight. Miller, his face beaded with sweat, shook his head. "It's everything, Captain. It's all his tricks in one box, and a dozen new ones. It's shielded against remote diagnostics. The entire atrium floor is a pressure plate. We've got motion sensors, sound sensors, it's a total denial environment. We can't get within 50 feet of it." As if to prove his point, a pigeon flew in through a shattered window and landed on the atrium floor. Instantly, a digital timer on the bomb, which had been holding steady at 60 minutes, began to count down twice as fast. A collective gasp went through the command van. A few seconds later, the bird flew away, and the timer returned to its original speed. The message was clear: nothing and no one could approach. The team was checkmated. They were staring at a problem they could not solve. Desperation began to creep in. A young technician suggested using a high-pressure water cannon to try and disrupt the mechanism from a distance. Miller immediately shut him down. The shockwave would trip the seismic sensors. "It's a suicide run." The minutes ticked by, each one a lifetime. The evacuation was painfully slow. They would never get all the children out in time. The conversation in the van turned to the unthinkable: a controlled detonation. It would mean sacrificing the entire west wing of the hospital, including the neonatal ICU. It was a horrific choice, but it was better than letting the bomb destroy the whole building. Rostova felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. She was failing. Her team was failing. Just as she was about to give the terrible order, a new voice spoke, quiet but clear. It was Anya. Throughout the entire crisis, she had been standing at the back of the van, silent and still, her eyes glued to the main monitor displaying the bomb. She hadn't been looking at the sensors or the electronics. She had been watching the gears, the intricate dance of the clockwork inside. She was watching its rhythm, its heartbeat. "Don't," she said, her voice soft but absolute. "A detonation won't work. The primary charge is surrounded by a series of secondary chemical explosives. The shockwave from a controlled blast would vaporize them, creating a toxic cloud that would poison the entire block." He's anticipated it. He wants us to do it. Rostova turned to face her. How do you know that? Anya pointed to a series of small, barely visible canisters arranged around the bomb's core. Those are borosilicate glass ampoules, she said. Commonly used in horology for holding cleaning solvents. But the color of the liquid inside, it's consistent with a binary nerve agent. He's not just trying to blow up the hospital. He's trying to salt the earth. The horror in the van was palpable. The clockmaker hadn't just built a bomb, he had built a doomsday device. They weren't just out of options, they had been walking into a far deadlier trap than they could have imagined. Defeat settled over them, heavy and suffocating. The ticking of the clock was the only sound. A heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the command van. The team stared at the monitors, at the monstrous, ticking sphere, their faces masks of defeat. They had been outmaneuvered at every turn by an enemy who seemed to possess a godlike understanding of their tactics and their limitations. The weight of the lives in the hospital, the tiny, fragile children they were supposed to protect, pressed down on them. It was a crushing, unbearable burden. Captain Rostova looked at the faces of her people, the best and the brightest, the most courageous public servants in the city, and saw only despair. The hammer had met a problem that could not be smashed. The scalpel of electronics had met a body that had no circuits to cut. They were beaten. She opened her mouth to give the evacuation order for her own team, to concede the field to the monster known as the clockmaker, to admit that they had failed. But before she could speak, Anya stepped forward. She moved from the back of the van to Rostova's side, her small frame seeming to radiate an aura of impossible calm in the midst of the rising panic. Her eyes were still locked on the image of the bomb, but her expression had changed. The intense concentration had softened into something else, a look of profound, almost intimate, understanding. It was the look of one master craftsman recognizing the work of another. "I can do it," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the despair like a diamond cutting glass. Every head in the van snapped towards her. "Anya, no," Rostova said immediately. "Miller said it's a total denial environment. We can't get close." "He's right," Anya agreed, her gaze never leaving the screen. "We can't get close with technology. The bomb is designed to defeat our tools. The sensors are looking for the electronic signatures of our equipment, the vibrations of our robots, the sound of our suits. It's a fortress built to keep us out." She paused, then turned to face Rostova, her eyes clear and certain. "But it's not designed to keep me out." He doesn't think like an engineer. He thinks like a watchmaker. This isn't a circuit diagram, it's an escapement mechanism. A grand, complex, beautiful escapement. The other technicians stared at her as if she were speaking a foreign language. But Rostova was listening, her mind racing. "What are you saying?" Anya pointed to the central gear assembly on the monitor. "Look. The entire mechanism is balanced on a single, central pivot. It's a masterpiece of weight distribution and kinetic energy. It's designed to react to any external force that disrupts its perfect equilibrium. A blast wave, a robot's touch, even the clumsy weight of a bomb suit. All of those things are noise. They're aggressive. They're attacks. The bomb is made to defend against an attack, but he hasn't defended against everything," she continued, her voice gaining a quiet, hypnotic confidence. "He's left a loophole. He's so proud of his creation, of its mechanical perfection, that he can't imagine anyone approaching it on its own terms. Not with force but with finesse. Not with electronics but with empathy. I don't need to break into his fortress. He's left the front door unlocked for anyone who knows how to turn the key." The team erupted. "That's insane," one of them shouted. "Empathy. It's a bomb, not a puppy." "Even if you're right," Miller argued, his voice gentle but firm, "the pressure plates cover the entire floor. How can you even reach it?" "He's a watchmaker," Anya repeated, a faint smile touching her lips for the first time. "He values precision above all else. A pressure plate that covers every square inch is inefficient. There will be gaps. Tiny ones, along the grout lines of the tiles. He would see no need to cover them, because they're too small for a boot to fit. But not for a foot without a boot. The full, terrifying, audacious scope of her plan began to dawn on them. She was going to walk in there, shedding the very armor and equipment that was designed to protect them, and face that mechanical monster with her bare hands. It was suicide. It was madness. But as Rostova looked into Anya's eyes, she didn't see madness. She saw a clarity of purpose that bordered on sublime. She saw the perfect score on the Hoffman Stability Index. She saw the girl who could spot a thread of light in a heat haze. She saw the woman who had stared down Jennings's impossible machine without a flicker of fear. She saw a weapon her team had never possessed before, a weapon the clockmaker would never anticipate. Rostova made the hardest decision of her career. She put her faith not in the protocols, not in the technology, but in the quiet, unassuming woman who had proven everyone wrong. "Clear the comms," Rostova commanded, her voice ringing with renewed authority. The van fell silent. "Clear the area. Pull everyone back to the 200-yard line. Everyone," she turned to Anya. "Are you sure about this?" "I am," Anya said simply. "Then go." Anya nodded once. She began to strip off her tactical vest, her heavy boots, her helmet. The other members of the team watched, their faces a mixture of awe and terror. She was peeling away every layer of her identity as a bomb tech, becoming something else, something more fundamental. She was left in her simple dark blue uniform, her feet now bare. She picked up a small leather roll from her kit, her personal tools, the delicate probes and tweezers of a watchmaker, and tucked it into her belt. She was ready. As she walked to the door of the van, a hand grabbed her arm. It was Peterson, the young technician who had offered her a bottle of water in the park. His face was pale. "Be careful," he whispered. Anya gave him a small, reassuring nod. She stepped out of the van and into the unreal silence of the deserted street. The hospital atrium loomed before her, a glass cathedral of fear. She took a deep, cleansing breath, the kind she used to take before starting a delicate repair, and began to walk. The long, lonely walk. Past the abandoned police cars and ambulances. Past the yellow tape that fluttered in the breeze like a line of prayer flags. Past the stunned faces of her colleagues, who watched her as if she were an apparition. She walked with a steady, unhurried grace, her bare feet silent on the asphalt. She was a solitary figure moving towards the heart of the storm, a David walking towards Goliath. She didn't look back. Her focus was absolute, her destination fixed. She was walking into the blast zone, into the ticking heart of the city's fear. And she was walking in alone. The world contracted until it was only the woman and the bomb. As Anya Sharma stepped through the shattered glass doors of the hospital atrium, a profound silence enveloped her. The distant wail of sirens faded away, replaced by a new, more intimate sound, the soft, rhythmic ticking of the device. It wasn't the menacing sound of a countdown, it was the steady, almost peaceful, heartbeat of a complex machine. It was a sound she had known her whole life, the sound of her father's workshop, the sound of time itself being measured and parsed. She felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. She was not in a blast zone, she was home. She paused at the edge of the tiled floor, her eyes scanning the surface, not for traps but for a path. As she had predicted, the pressure plates were large squares, perfectly fitted within the grid of the tiles. But along the grout lines, there were tiny, half-inch gaps. A safe passage, invisible to anyone shod in the clumsy armor of fear. She began to walk, placing her bare feet with the delicate precision of a ballerina, her toes and heels landing only on the thin, safe lines of grout. It was a slow, meditative journey, a tightrope walk over a sea of annihilation. In the command van, the team watched on the monitors, their breath caught in their chests. They saw her slow, graceful progress and understood the terrifying genius of her plan. They were watching a performance of a skill they never knew existed, a form of courage so quiet and so profound it defied their understanding. From their perspective, she looked impossibly small and fragile in the vast, echoing atrium, a tiny figure of life in a cathedral built for death. A single misstep, a single tremor of uncertainty would mean the end. But Anya did not tremble. Her mind was in the quiet place, that state of pure focus she had cultivated over thousands of hours at her workbench. The world of fear and consequence fell away. There was only the path, the rhythm of her own breathing, and the steady, ticking heartbeat of the machine that was waiting for her. Finally, she stood before it. The bomb was even more beautiful and terrifying up close. It was a marvel of engineering, a sphere of polished steel and gleaming brass gears, all moving in a hypnotic, intricate ballet. It was the clockmaker's soul, rendered in metal. It was a monument to order, control, and a terrible, hidden pain. Anya knew, with a certainty that went beyond logic, that the man who built this was not a monster of chaos. He was a monster of broken perfection. For a long moment, she did not move. She did not reach for her tools. Instead, she did something that made the observers in the van gasp. She reached out and placed her bare hands gently on the cool metal surface of the bomb. She closed her eyes. She was not trying to disarm it. She was listening to it. Her fingertips, sensitive from years of handling microscopic components, felt the faint, high-frequency vibrations of the mechanism. She felt the hum of stored energy in the tightly wound springs, the whisper of the gears as they meshed, the perfectly balanced rhythm of the central escapement that governed the entire machine. She was reading it like a blind person reads Braille, learning its secrets through touch and intuition. She was communicating with the creation, and through it with the Creator. Then, her eyes snapped open. They were filled with a fierce, lucid clarity. She had her path. She unrolled her leather toolkit. Her hands, which the men in her unit had once mocked as being too small and delicate, became instruments of impossible grace. They moved with a speed and confidence that was mesmerizing. She did not cut a single wire. Her tools were probes, picks, and tiny, specialized wrenches. She wasn't attacking the bomb, she was healing it. She inserted a thin probe into a nearly invisible seam in the casing, and with a practiced twist, released a hidden clasp. A small panel slid open, revealing not a tangle of wires, but a series of tiny, calibrated dials, like the regulators on a high-end chronometer. This was the bomb's central nervous system. In the command van, Miller's jaw hung open. "My God," he breathed. "It's a regulator assembly. He's not using a timer, he's using a mainspring. The entire countdown is governed by the tension on that spring. She's not disarming a bomb, she's letting down a watch." Anya's hands moved in a blur. She was adjusting the dials, releasing the stored energy in the mainspring in small, controlled increments. With each turn, the frantic ticking of the mechanism slowed, the gears turning more and more languidly. She was coaxing the machine to sleep, gently persuading it to surrender its terrible power. It was a process that required absolute, unwavering focus. One dial turned too far, one spring released too quickly, and the delicate balance would be shattered, triggering a catastrophic release of energy. But Anya's hands were steady. Her breathing was even. She was in a perfect state of flow, a duet with the deadly machine. The final component was a mercury switch, a small glass vial of liquid metal, balanced on a hair trigger. It was the final failsafe, the bomb maker's last cruel trick. Anya saw it, and she understood. It wasn't meant to be disabled. It was meant to be balanced. Holding her breath, she used two thin probes as chopsticks, gently cradling the vial. She slowly, painstakingly, tilted it back, moving the bubble of mercury away from the contacts, until it settled into a tiny, stable indentation in the glass. It was a move of such microscopic precision that it seemed impossible. The ticking stopped. The gears ceased their motion. A profound and total silence fell over the atrium. On the bomb's main display, the countdown clock, which had been at less than a minute, froze. Then, the numbers dissolved, replaced by a single, blinking word, inert. In the command van, for a split second, there was only stunned silence. Then, the room exploded. Cheers, shouts, sobs of relief erupted in a raw, cathartic wave. Strangers hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. Captain Rostova slumped into her chair, a ragged, shuddering breath escaping her lips. She stared at the monitor, at the image of Anya standing serene and untouched before the silence machine, and she felt a wave of awe so powerful it was almost painful. Back in the atrium, Anya slowly stood up. She took one last look at the beautiful, harmless object, a silent monument to a battle of wills that she had won. She turned and began her walk back, her steps just as deliberate and graceful as they had been on the way in. This time, however, she was not walking through a corridor of fear, but into a wave of adoration. As she stepped out of the hospital, the entire force of police officers and firefighters who had been holding the perimeter broke into spontaneous, thunderous applause. It washed over her, a sound of pure, unadulterated gratitude. She looked at their faces, these hardened, cynical men and women, and saw that they were weeping openly without shame. She had not just saved the hospital. She had saved them. She had restored their faith that courage and skill could still win, that one quiet soul could stand against the darkness and hold the line. At the edge of the crowd, a figure stepped forward. It was Mark Jennings. He had heard the call on the radio and had come from his basement office, drawn by the crisis, unable to stay away. He had watched the entire event on a monitor in a patrol car, his face a canvas of disbelief, then horror, then a dawning, shattering understanding. He had not just been wrong about Anya Sharma, he had been wrong about everything. About strength, about courage, about the very nature of the job he had loved. He stood before her now, his uniform rumpled, his face streaked with tears. The arrogance was gone, stripped away, leaving only a broken, humbled man. He started, his voice cracking. I was wrong. I was so wrong. About you. About everything. He couldn't continue. A sob choked him. Anya looked at him, and in her eyes, there was no triumph, no hint of "I told you so," there was only a quiet, compassionate understanding. She simply nodded, a gesture of forgiveness and acceptance that was more powerful than any words. She had not only disarmed the bomb, she had disarmed his hatred. The resolution was swift and profound. Anya Sharma became a hero, not just in the city but across the country. She was awarded the department's highest honor, the Medal of Valor, in a ceremony where the mayor called her the quiet guardian of our city, but she refused the offers of promotions and high-profile positions. Instead, she asked for one thing: to become the head of training for the bomb squad. Her request was granted immediately. She revolutionized their methods. She didn't throw out the old rulebook, but she added new chapters. She taught them not just about electronics and demolitions, but about patience, observation, and intuition. She brought in puzzles, intricate mechanical boxes, and even watchmaking kits, teaching her hardened colleagues how to use a delicate touch, how to listen, how to see the story inside the machine. She taught them that sometimes, the most powerful tool was not a pair of wire cutters, but a steady, empathetic hand. The team was transformed. They became the most elite unit in the country, renowned not for their aggression, but for their creative, adaptable, and deeply intelligent approach to their deadly craft. Captain Rostova watched it all, her heart filled with a fierce pride. Her one great gamble had paid off in ways she could never have imagined. Anya had not just joined the team, she had reforged it. She had saved it from its own rigid traditions, from its own blindness. She had saved it from itself. And so we ask again, what does courage look like? It looks like the steady hands of a watchmaker. It looks like the quiet focus that can hear a signal in a world of noise. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it is the mastery of it. It is the deep, unshakable understanding that true strength isn't about the noise you make or the force you apply, but about the quiet, unwavering purpose you hold when the world is screaming for you to break. Anya Sharma taught an entire city that the most dangerous threats are not defeated by the biggest explosions, but by the smallest, most precise, and most courageous of actions. She reminded them that heroes are not always the ones who stand in the spotlight. Sometimes, they are the ones who walk into the darkness alone, and with nothing but their own quiet strength, turn on the light for the rest of us. Share this story if you believe in the hidden, untapped potential that lies within every single person. Look around you and look closer. Remind someone today that their quiet strength, their unique skill, the very thing the world might overlook, might just be the thing that saves us all.